The night air was thick with the scent of smoke, and the distant crackling of fire blended with the panicked shouts of neighbors. Maya's heart pounded as she raced toward the source of the chaos. It wasn't like her to get involved. She had always been the type to keep her head down, to walk away when trouble surfaced. But something about the desperate cries, the sheer urgency in the air, propelled her forward. The apartment complex at the end of the street was engulfed in flames, the orange glow flickering wildly against the dark sky. People were already outside, some shouting, others clutching children or pets, their faces streaked with soot and tears. A woman screamed for her husband, her voice hoarse from the smoke. The sirens were still distant, nowhere near close enough to make a difference. Maya was about to turn away when she saw him, a man trapped on the second-floor balcony, coughing violently, his silhouette barely visible through the thickening smoke. He was struggling, one hand gripping the railing, the other shielding his face. The fire had already reached his floor, and within moments, the flames would swallow him whole. Without thinking, Maya ran. Her mind barely registered the voices screaming at her to stop as she sprinted toward the building's side entrance. The door was unlocked, likely left open by fleeing tenants, and she pushed through the suffocating heat. Smoke stung her eyes, filling her lungs with each ragged breath, but she pressed on. The stairs groaned under her weight as she climbed, the heat intensifying with every step. The walls were alive with creeping flames, eating through the drywall, turning everything to ash. She reached the second floor, barely able to see past the thick haze, and called out, "Hey, I'm here to help you. Can you move?" A fit of coughing was the only response, followed by a weak, wheezing voice. "Here, I'm here." Maya followed the sound, pushing through the smoke until she found him, collapsed against the doorframe of his apartment, his clothes singed, his face streaked with soot. "We have to go now," she urged, hooking an arm under his shoulder. He was heavy, nearly dead weight, but adrenaline gave her strength. Step by step, they stumbled down the hallway, dodging falling embers and crumbling beams. The fire roared behind them, an unstoppable force of destruction. The exit was just ahead, a few more steps, a final push, and they would be out. Then the floor gave way beneath them. Maya barely had time to scream as they fell, crashing through debris and smoke, landing in what had once been the lobby. Pain shot through her leg, but she ignored it, her only concern the man beside her. "Hey, stay with me." She shook him, panic rising. "You have to get up." The front door was just a few feet away, wide open, leading to safety. But the man wasn't moving. Summoning every ounce of strength left in her body, Maya grabbed his arm and dragged him forward. The fire was closing in, heat licking at her back, the very air around her vibrating with intensity. She could hear sirens now, finally closing in, but she didn't have time to wait. With a final desperate pull, she hauled him over the threshold, collapsing onto the pavement just as firefighters swarmed in. Then everything went black. Maya woke to the steady beeping of a heart monitor. The hospital room was stark white, the fluorescent lights burning into her retinas. Her throat was raw, her body aching in places she didn't even know existed. For a moment, she couldn't remember why she was there. Then it hit her, the fire, the man. Before she could sit up, the door creaked open. A nurse stepped inside, offering a warm but cautious smile. "You're lucky," she said, checking Maya's vitals. "You inhaled a lot of smoke, but no serious injuries. You'll be discharged soon." Maya swallowed, her throat dry as sandpaper. "The man, the one I pulled out, is he okay?" The nurse hesitated. "He's alive. Thanks to you. He suffered from smoke inhalation, but he's stable. He asked about you, actually." Maya blinked. "He did?" "Yes. He's in the room down the hall. Do you want to see him?" A strange feeling settled in Maya's chest. She had saved his life. Of course, he'd want to thank her. But there was something unsettling about the way the nurse looked at her, as if there was more she wasn't saying. Still, curiosity won over caution. "Yeah," she said, voice hoarse. "I'll see him." With the nurse's help, Maya made her way down the hallway, each step slow and unsteady. The hospital air was cold, sterile, a stark contrast to the fiery hellscape she had barely escaped. The man's room was dimly lit, the blinds half drawn. He was sitting up in bed, an oxygen mask resting against his lap. When he saw her, a slow smile spread across his face. "I was hoping you'd come," he said, voice still rough from the smoke. Maya took a hesitant step inside. He was younger than she had expected, probably in his early 30s, with sharp blue eyes and a face that looked like it'd seen more than its fair share of hardships. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay," she said. His smile widened. "I should be the one saying that to you. You saved my life." Maya shrugged, uncomfortable under his gaze. It was the right thing to do. Silence stretched between them, thick with something unspoken. Then he spoke again. "My name is Daniel." He extended a hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Maya shook it. His grip was firm, lingering just a second too long. "I won't forget this, Maya," he said softly, his eyes locking onto hers. "I owe you everything." Something in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. It wasn't gratitude. It was something else. Something deeper. Something she couldn't quite place. And for the first time since the fire, a sliver of unease crept into her bones. The hospital cafeteria smelled of burnt coffee and sterilized air. Maya stirred the tea in front of her, the rhythmic clinking of the spoon against a ceramic mug offering some sense of grounding. Her hand still trembled slightly, remnants of the adrenaline that had coursed through her veins just days ago. She had saved a life, Daniel's life. But something about him unsettled her. It wasn't fear exactly, more like an instinct, an awareness she couldn't shake. She had expected him to be grateful. What she hadn't expected was the way he watched her, as if he knew something she didn't. His words replayed in her mind. "I won't forget this, Maya. I owe you everything." Why did that feel less like gratitude and more like a promise? A shadow loomed over her table, pulling her from her thoughts. "Mind if I sit?" Maya looked up, her pulse quickening. Daniel stood there, a tray of food in his hands, his hospital gown now replaced with casual clothes, jeans and a sweater that looked just a little too expensive for someone who had just lost everything in a fire. She hesitated before nodding. "Sure." He sat across from her, his movements measured, his gaze never leaving her. "How are you feeling?" Maya exhaled slowly. "Better, I guess. Just processing everything." Daniel nodded, as if he understood exactly what she meant. "Yeah, it's surreal. One moment, you're living your life, and the next, it's all gone." His words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Maya cleared her throat. "Did you, lose anything important in the fire? Family? Friend?" Daniel's lips twitched slightly, almost amused by the question. "No, I live alone. I work from home, so most of my life was in that apartment." That should have made Maya feel better, but it didn't. "You don't seem too shaken up about it," she observed cautiously. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Because I'm not. My apartment, my belongings, they were just things. But you saved me, and that's not something I take lightly." Maya's grip on her mug tightened. There it was again, that unnerving intensity. She forced a small smile. Anyone would have done the same. Daniel tilted his head slightly, studying her. "No, not anyone. A lot of people were outside, watching. You were the only one who ran into the fire." Maya swallowed hard. She had no response to that. Then Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black notebook, sliding it across the table toward her. "I want you to have this." Maya hesitated before picking it up. The leather cover was smooth beneath her fingers, and when she flipped it open, she found a handwritten message on the first page. For Maya, a life saved deserved a life given in return. Her stomach twisted. What does this mean?" Daniel smiled, but there was something off about it. "I told you, I owe you everything, and I intend to repay that debt." A cold shiver ran down her spine. Maya was released from the hospital later that evening, but the lingering unease followed her home. Her apartment was small but comfortable, a modest space that had always felt safe. But that night, as she locked the door behind her and kicked off her shoes, it felt different. She shook off the feeling, telling herself she was just exhausted. A long shower helped. The scalding water, washing away the remnants of smoke and soot that still clung to her skin. By the time she settled into bed, she had almost convinced herself that she was overreacting, until she heard it, a knock at the door. Her body tensed. It was almost midnight. Who would be visiting her at this hour? Slowly, she got out of bed and padded toward the door, her heart thudding against her ribs. Peering through the peephole, she felt a jolt of shock. Daniel. He stood there, hands in the pockets of his jacket, his expression calm. Maya hesitated before cracking the door open, keeping the chain lock secured. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" "I just wanted to check on you," he said smoothly. "Make sure you got home safe." Maya forced a tight smile. "I did. Thanks." A beat of silence passed before Daniel spoke again. "Aren't you going to invite me in?" Something about the way he said it made her skin crawl. She kept her grip firm on the door. "It's late, Daniel. Maybe we can talk tomorrow." For a moment, his expression remained unreadable. Then, finally, he nodded. "Of course. Sleep well, Maya." She shut the door quickly, locking it with every bolt. Her breath came fast and shallow as she leaned against the wood. Something was wrong. Daniel wasn't just grateful. He was obsessed. The next few days were strange. Everywhere Maya went, Daniel was there. At the grocery store, browsing the aisles like he just happened to be there at the same time. At the coffee shop she visited every morning. Seated just a few tables away, his eyes fixed on her over the rim of his cup, he never approached her outright, never did anything that could be considered overtly threatening. But he was always there, watching. It was starting to feel suffocating. Then, one evening, as she was walking home, she spotted something that made her stomach drop. A car, parked across from her apartment. Inside, barely visible through the windshield, was Daniel. Maya's hands clenched into fists. This had to stop. Summoning every ounce of courage, she marched across the street and rapped on the driver's side window. Daniel rolled it down smoothly, as if he had been expecting her. "Hey, Maya." Her voice came out sharper than she intended. "What are you doing here?" He smiled, but there was something eerily calm about it. "Just making sure you're safe." She inhaled sharply. "Daniel, listen. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but you don't owe me anything. You don't have to keep showing up like this." His smile faltered, just slightly. "But I do. You saved my life. I have to repay that." Maya shook her head. "That's not how this works. I don't need anything from you. I need you to move on." Daniel's expression darkened, just for a moment, before the unsettling calm returned. "All right, Maya, if that's what you want." He started the car and drove off, leaving Maya standing there, her body tense with unease. Maybe that was it. Maybe he would finally let her go. But deep down, she knew better. This wasn't over. Not even close. Maya barely slept that night. Even though Daniel had driven away, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was still watching, that somehow he had found a way to be near, even if she couldn't see him. She double-checked the locks on her door, pulled the curtains tightly shut, even placed a chair under the doorknob, just in case. But despite her precautions, the feeling didn't go away. Every creak of her apartment seemed louder. Every passing car made her flinch. She felt trapped inside her own home, haunted by a man who had done nothing explicitly wrong, yet. But she knew this wasn't gratitude. This was possession. By morning, Maya had made up her mind. She needed help. The police station was dimly lit, with buzzing fluorescent lights casting a sickly glow over the waiting area. The officer behind the desk barely glanced up as Maya approached. "I need to report someone," she said, gripping the edge of the counter. The officer, a stocky man with tired eyes, finally looked at her. "What kind of report?" Maya exhaled. "A man, Daniel. He's been following me, showing up at places I go, watching me." The officer's brow furrowed slightly, but his tone remained neutral. "Has he threatened you?" Maya hesitated. "No, but..." "Has he tried to break into your home? Harm you in any way?" "No, but he's always there. He won't leave me alone." The officer sighed and leaned back in his chair. "Ma'am, I understand this is upsetting, but unless he's done something illegal, there's not much we can do. You could file a restraining order, but without a clear threat or incident, it might not hold up. Maya's stomach churned. So, what? You're telling me to wait until something happens. The officer didn't answer. His silence said enough. She left the station feeling worse than when she arrived. That evening, Maya sat at her kitchen table, staring at the black notebook Daniel had given her. She had been too disturbed to read past the first page. But now she needed to know. Flipping through the pages, she quickly realized it wasn't just a journal. It was a log, meticulously written, detailing events that spanned years. And the deeper she read, the colder her blood ran. Page after page described near-death experiences. Fires, car accidents, falls. Each entry had a name at the top, and next to each name was the same phrase, written in precise handwriting. A life saved deserves a life given in return. Maya's breath hitched as she turned to the most recent page. Her name was written there. Beneath it, Daniel's handwriting spelled out something that sent ice through her veins. My life belongs to Maya now, until my debt is repaid. Her hands trembled as she snapped the notebook shut. This wasn't just about obsession. Daniel had done this before, and she wasn't the first person he had owed his life to. Maya's fingers flew across her keyboard, searching for anything, any mention of Daniel's past. And then she found it, a news article, dated 5 years ago. Local man miraculously survives house fire, rescued by a stranger. The photo beneath the headline made her stomach lurch. It was Daniel. She scrolled further. The article mentioned the woman who had saved him, a teacher named Claire Thompson. Heart pounding, Maya searched for Claire's name. And then another headline. Local teacher found dead in her home, cause unknown. Maya's breath came in short gasps. Claire had saved Daniel, and then she had died. Terror gripped her as she realized what this meant. Daniel's gratitude wasn't about repaying a debt. It was about taking something in return. Maya grabbed her phone, fingers shaking as she dialed the police. It rang twice before a voice answered. 911, what's your emergency? I need help. There's a man. He's been following me. I think he's dangerous. The dispatcher's voice remained calm. What's your location, ma'am? Maya opened her mouth to answer. Knock, knock, knock. Her entire body went rigid. The sound wasn't coming from her front door. It was coming from her bedroom window. She turned her head slowly, dread tightening around her throat. Through the gap in the curtains, she saw him, Daniel, standing outside, staring in. A slow, deliberate smile spread across his lips. Maya dropped the phone. Her nightmare had just begun. Maya's heart pounded so hard she thought it might shatter her ribs. Daniel was outside her bedroom window, watching, smiling. Her breath hitched as she staggered backward, her phone still clutched in her trembling hand. The dispatcher's voice crackled from the speaker. Ma'am, are you still there? Maya scrambled to pick up the phone, but before she could answer, the power went out. The apartment was plunged into darkness. Her breath came in quick, sharp gasps. The only light was the eerie glow of the moon filtering through the curtains. And Daniel's silhouette was still there, unmoving, like a shadow carved from something unnatural. Maya didn't wait. She bolted the front door, fumbling to unlock it. Click. The sound came from behind her, her bedroom window. He was coming in. Maya didn't think. She ran. She wrenched open the front door and sprinted down the hallway, her bare feet slapping against the wooden floor. Behind her, she swore she heard slow, deliberate footsteps following. She didn't stop, didn't turn back. Her apartment complex had an emergency exit at the end of the hall, a metal door with a rusted handle. She lunged for it. Bang. The door wouldn't budge. Maya let out a choked sob, shaking the handle frantically. It was stuck. Why was it stuck? Then, a voice. Soft, calm, almost tender. You don't have to run, Maya. The hair on the back of her neck rose. She turned slowly, chest heaving. Daniel stood at the opposite end of the hall. He was inside. Even in the dim light, his eyes gleamed with something that made Maya's stomach twist. "I told you," he said. His voice almost hurt. "I owe you my life." Maya's hand clenched into a fist. "You don't owe me anything, Daniel." His lips twitched into that same eerie smile. "That's not how it works." Maya's mind raced. She thought of the notebook, the names, the deaths, the people who had saved him, only to die. She took a step back, pressing herself against the unyielding exit door. "Did you kill them?" Daniel's smile faded. He tilted his head, as if the question confused him. "No," he said softly. "I didn't kill anyone." Maya's breath caught. "Then what happened to them?" Daniel sighed, running a hand through his dark, tousled hair. "I told you, a life saved deserves a life given in return." His gaze met hers, and for the first time, she saw something beyond the obsession, something far worse. "I belong to you now," he whispered, "until the debt is repaid." A shiver crawled down Maya's spine. She thought back to the article. The woman before her, Claire, she had saved Daniel. And then, somehow, she had died. Maya's hands were shaking as she whispered, "What happens when the debt is repaid?" Daniel didn't answer. He didn't have to, because she already knew. Maya couldn't stay here. She had to get out, now. Her eyes flicked to the only other escape route, the stairwell leading to the lower floors. If she could make it outside, she could run, find help. Without hesitation, she moved. She sprinted toward the stairwell, her pulse roaring in her ears. Daniel's footsteps followed, slow and steady, like he knew she couldn't escape. Maya burst through the stairwell door and flew down the steps, gripping the railing to keep from falling. 3 floors, 2 floors, 1. A shadow appeared at the bottom of the stairs. Maya's stomach dropped. "Daniel, how?" She whipped around, ready to go back up, but Daniel was behind her too. A low chuckle echoed through the stairwell. Maya's chest rose and fell in ragged gasps. How did you?" He took a slow step forward. "I told you, Maya. There's nowhere you can go that I won't follow." Maya pressed herself against the wall, her mind spiraling. He was playing with her, toying with the inevitable. She had one option left. She turned and ran straight at him. The move caught Daniel off guard. For a split second, his expression flickered with something like surprise. Then Maya slammed into him. She shoved him with all her strength, sending him stumbling back, off balance. His foot missed a step. For the first time, Daniel's face twisted in shock. Then he fell, down the stairs. The world seemed to move in slow motion as his body crashed against the concrete steps, tumbling hard. Maya gasped, watching as he landed at the bottom, motionless. Silence filled the stairwell. She clutched the railing, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Was it over? Was he? A groan. Maya's stomach twisted as Daniel's body stirred. He pushed himself up, slowly. His head lifted. And then he laughed. It was a low, hollow sound that sent ice through her veins. Maya ran. She didn't look back. She sprinted out of the building and into the empty streets, the cold night air burning her lungs. She didn't stop until she reached the nearest gas station, where she collapsed inside, gasping for breath. The clerk looked up, startled. "Miss, are you okay?" Maya couldn't answer. She was shaking, her hands clammy, her mind spinning. She forced herself to turn. Daniel wasn't there, but she knew this wasn't over. Somewhere he was watching, waiting, because the debt hadn't been repaid. Not yet. Maya sat in the gas station, her body trembling, sweat slicking her skin despite the chill in the air. Daniel was gone, but she knew this wasn't over. The clerk, a lanky man with tired eyes, leaned forward. "Miss, do you need me to call someone?" Maya swallowed hard, trying to steady her voice. "The police. Call the police." The clerk nodded and reached for the phone. But even as he dialed, Maya felt a sickening certainty settle over her. The police wouldn't help. She had tried. She had begged. But Daniel wasn't breaking any laws. He wasn't a criminal. He was something else. And she was trapped in his game. The police arrived within minutes, their flashing lights washing over quiet streets. Maya was still shaking as she told them everything about Daniel, the stalking, the notebook, the deaths. One of the officers, a woman with sharp eyes, frowned. Daniel Hayes? Maya's breath hitched. You know him? The officer nodded slowly. We've had reports about him before. Strange ones. Maya's pulse pounded. What happened to the people who reported him? The officer hesitated. Most of them disappeared. A cold weight settled in Maya's stomach. The officer sighed. We'll look into it. But Maya didn't hear the rest, because her phone buzzed. A new email. The sender's name made her breath stop. Claire Thompson, the woman who saved Daniel before her. Hands shaking, she opened the message. Subject: if he finds you, run. Maya's pulse thundered as she read Claire's words. If you're reading this, it means he's found you. I know what you're going through. I went through it too. Daniel isn't a man. He's a curse. I saved his life, and from that moment on, he followed me everywhere, watching, smiling, waiting. He told me the same thing he told you. A life saved deserves a life given in return. At first, I thought he wanted to kill me, but it's worse than that. He doesn't kill. He waits. He watches. And when the time is right, something else takes you. Maya's breath came in ragged gasps. Claire's final words sent ice through her veins. I tried to run. It didn't matter. You can't run from a debt like this. You can only pass it on. Maya's vision blurred. She stared at the words on the screen, her mind racing. Pass it on. Was that how Claire had died? Had she tried to give Daniel's debt to someone else? Her hands clenched into fists. If she did nothing, she would end up like Claire. If she wanted to live, she had to find someone else to save her. Her stomach churned. Could she do it? Could she let someone else suffer the way she had? She thought of the people in her life, the neighbors she barely knew, her co-workers. And then she thought of the officer, the woman who had taken her statement, the woman who now believed her. Maya's heart pounded. A life saved deserved a life given in return. A terrible, unspeakable idea crept into her mind. She could warn the officer, or she could let her find Daniel first. Let her be the next to save him. Let her take the debt. Maya's breath hitched. And then she made her choice. 3 days passed. Maya sat in her apartment, staring at the front page of the local news. Police officer found dead in apartment. No signs of forced entry. Maya swallowed hard. She read the article 3 times. The details were vague. No cause of death. No suspects. But she already knew Daniel had moved on. The debt had been repaid. Maya slowly exhaled, leaning back against her chair. For the first time in weeks, she felt safe. But as she stood and walked toward the window, she hesitated. A shadow flickered in the reflection, a shape behind her. A slow, deliberate smile. Maya spun around, but there was nothing there. Her heart pounded. Had she really escaped? Or had she simply passed something much, much worse on to someone else? And if so, how long before it found her again?